The 2025 NFL Draft. Elite running backs. Extremely deep tight end class. A two-way offensive and defensive superstar. A quarterback that wears a watch. This is what we have to look forward to. Welcome to the Dynasty Daddy YouTube channel. Today, I really kind of wanted to touch on the quarterbacks in the 2025 NFL draft class and see, are these quarterbacks that we can trust to fix our need, or are they more of this middle range quarterback that we've really seen kind of grow as a common trend across fantasy over the past couple of years? So let's jump on into it. If this is your first time stopping by, or if you're a returning viewer and you haven't subscribed already, I really appreciate if you would. We are a small channel here. We're trying to hit 1,000 subs, and it's completely easy. Y'all know what to do, but that would really help out my channel grow. So anyway, back to the video. First, to kind of get an understanding of what I'm talking about by mid-range quarterback, I kind of want to define what an elite quarterback is and what is someone that we really want from a fantasy football perspective. So looking back at 2024, we had 6 quarterbacks score over 20 points per game in a full PPR format, right? And that would be Lamar, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield, surprisingly, Hurts, and Jared Goff. So this was actually a year where we saw a lot of elevated offenses, right? If you look at all the quarterbacks that score as top scorers, they are locked into one of those elite offenses, and that's really kind of the trend that we're seeing. You need to either be kind of that two-way threat, like a Lamar Jackson, a Josh Allen, a Jalen Hurts. They're always up there because they get the additional rushing yards. Or you need to be tied to an offense that is just one of the best in the league. That's why you have a Burrow, a Mayfield, a Goff hanging out in the top 6 in this year's quarterback rankings. So that's really kind of what we're looking for, is how do we tie elite offenses with quarterbacks that might not have that rushing upside. Let's compare it to 2023, where we only had 5 quarterbacks. Only 5 quarterbacks broke that 20-point per game threshold, and that was Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Joe Flacco. I mean, it was a small sample size, but yes, Joe Flacco, Lamar Jackson, and Dak Prescott. And again, what do we see here? Well, Dak Prescott, more of a pocket passing type quarterback. He was tied to an elite offense last year, or not last year, but in 2023, that was an elite offense. They were scoring crazy. Those are the types of years where you can see one of those kind of pocket passing quarterbacks elevate themselves into that elite tier. And then, someone like Joe Flacco, again, like, there's some outliers, and that's kind of why you want to roster a lot of those backups, because you can get a guy that goes off like Joe Flacco. Traditionally, we're going to want to invest in quarterbacks that obviously have that massive rushing upside. Allen, Hurts, and Lamar Jackson are pretty much always locked in as top 5 quarterbacks every year, and they break that 20-point per game threshold that we're really looking for, even on down years. I mean, Jalen Hurts in 2023 and in 2024 had stretches where everyone was kind of down on him, but he's still scoring elite production, and I don't really care if the sentiment is lower on him or he loses a little bit of dynasty value. At the end of the day, if he's scoring 20 points per game, that's going to help my fantasy team win, and I'm going to always be kind of a contender in my league. So when looking at the top of the 2025 class, do we see anyone that fits this type of prototype, right? Someone that is either going to go to an elite offense or someone that has that rushing upside that is interesting to us. I haven't done a ton of mock drafts yet, but I will be doing that later this year on this channel. But obviously the top 3 quarterbacks, and frankly, it's kind of a top 2 quarterbacks that are really going to be at the top of the draft, are Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. And if we look at both of them, neither of them have that elite upside of a Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and Jalen Hurts, especially on the ground. So we're kind of looking at this and saying the likelihood of like Sanders becoming Lamar Jackson's extremely low. They're very different play styles. So they need to be put into good offensive systems that they can thrive in. And frankly, the way the draft is shaken out, they're most likely going to the Titans, the Browns, or the Giants. One of those 3, those have the top 3 picks. They're probably going to end up in those 3 situations. None of those situations, to me, instill confidence that situation is going to put them in the best to succeed. I mean, I think probably the best would be like the Giants with Neighbors and Dable. Still, I am hesitant that any of those situations will really bear some fruit for fantasy football production. So you might be asking me, hey, Jeremy, how does this talent compare to the previous draft classes? And is this something to be concerned about, or should we feel confident picking Sanders, Ward, and even Milroe in 2025? So something I wanted to kind of easily compare is just the talent at the top of the class and kind of the top 3 quarterbacks. In a super flex league, especially, the quality of a draft class is really defined by the quarterback, I feel like. You can have weaker classes where there's a ton of wide receivers and running backs, but having those elite level quarterbacks just gets people excited and makes those high end picks more valuable. In 2025, we have obviously Sanders, Ward, and I did put Jalen Milroe. I do think he'll be kind of a second round pick, so it'll probably be a second round pick in fantasy or like a late first. So he's not kind of the same caliber, but we really only have 2 top-end quarterbacks that are probably going to go in the draft. And both Sanders and Ward, like I said previously, aren't this giant rushing upside machine and are certainly not the caliber of previous year's quarterbacks. If we look at Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May, all 3 of those quarterbacks would easily outrank Sanders and Ward if they were in this year's draft. And Caleb Williams was touted as a generational prospect. I mean, as a Panthers fan, I was so sad. I was literally fighting off depression, trying to cope with the fact that we traded Caleb Williams and DJ Moore for Bryce Young. But Caleb Williams was touted as like the next great prospect. Jaden Daniels has rushing upside and is an incredible passer and just completely turned it around. One of the most depressing organizations. Drake May's looked amazing, and he has the big frame. He's mobile. Again, a lot of things you want to see from that type of quarterback. Even the 2023 class, which was weaker than 2024 at quarterback, had Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and Anthony Richardson as all top 4 picks. All 3 of them boasted higher ranks than the quarterbacks in the 2025 class. Frankly, I think you have to go back to the Malik Willis draft before you have a class that's weaker than 2025 at the quarterback position. So that's kind of the hesitation I have when looking at the quarterbacks that are coming into this class, especially Sanders and Ward. I don't think they'll be bad, but I also don't think they're anything more than that middling range quarterback. Even look this year with some of those late top 10 picks in Penix, Bo Nix, and J.J. McCarthy, those quarterbacks are about in the same tier, I would say, as Sanders and Ward, where we feel somewhat confident with them, but they're not quarterbacks that I'm super excited in. I do think Bo Nix is probably about the tier of like the best outcome we could see from a Ward or a Sanders in year 1. Given that these aren't the best prospects, what are some ways we can kind of take advantage of that and not get caught up in the hype? Something that's nice about having those mid-range quarterbacks is it's a big group. It's a big party. It's easy to kind of move between QB2s, QB3s on a year-to-year basis. Given that I know these quarterbacks this year aren't can't-miss prospects, what would I be looking to do from a fantasy football perspective? If I'm stuck with one of the 102, the 103, the 104, and I don't want to take one of the top running backs or wide receivers, I really need this pick to address a quarterback need. I think potentially using the value of that pick and tearing down to pick up a quarterback and a later pick is one of the best moves you can make right now. High-end picks, people love. People love knowing that they have a high-end pick, especially once draft season happens and all of that. Picks are only going to pick up steam from now. Players like Darnold, Geno Smith, Matthew Stafford, Baker Mayfield, Brock Purdy, Tua, Kirk Cousins, J.J. McCarthy, all these players kind of don't have that shine. There's a huge tier of quarterbacks that are going to score weekly 12 through 20 points. At the end of the day, that's all I really need. Is I need to know I can pick up some of those guys and kind of buy and sell on the hype of, oh, Tua did good for 4 weeks. Now he has higher value. I can trade him for something else, right? This pick, people are going to see the 103, and they're going to say, oh, I should really trade player X for this pick. I should move up from the 106 and toss in, Geno Smith or something. There's ways to kind of maneuver around with quarterbacks that just don't have that elite level value. Because the reality is Sanders, Ward, best case outcome is their Bo Nix, right? Best in terms of fantasy value. And even if they're Bo Nix, which are probably not going to be that good, even if they're Bo Nix, I don't think they have the elite level 20 point per game upside that one of those players should have to hold that type of value. Here's the first trade I have. It's J.J. McCarthy in the 105 for the 103 and the 203. Something I've heard from some NFL scouts in reports out there is that teams view J.J. McCarthy as the 101 if he was in this class, meaning he would be over Sanders, over Ward as a prospect. And what you can do is say, cool, McCarthy had a redshirt freshman year in the NFL. I can take the 103, move back 2 spots in the draft, meaning that I can still take advantage of the depth at both running back and tight end in this class, and pick up a quarterback need that potentially is going to be better than the one that I can draft at the 103 itself. Sure, you have to toss in the 203, but I think this is an incredible return. You still stay in the draft, stay in a range where you can get that running back production that you need, or even, catch a wide receiver that falls. But you snag a young Dynasty asset, J.J. McCarthy, that either he plays in Minnesota or he finds some other way to play. But J.J. McCarthy is definitely going to see the field, whether it's in Minnesota or not, and you lock in. Basically, you split that for 2 high-end pieces. I think that's a great way to use that to take advantage of the value that having that high-end pick, having that new flashy quarterback is going to do for you. Next one it's kind of an interesting one. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but Bryce Young in the 103 for the 101. And I will say in the format that it's in, right, it's a 2-quarterback, 8-team, start 9. I'm always going to go with the consolidation move here, right? Quarterbacks don't really matter in this format. And if you can get up to the 101, you're locking yourself into a National Genie. I would love this. I would probably love it in most formats, to be honest. But I do think if it wasn't the 101, if it was the 102 or the 10, if I went from the 103 to the 105 and pick up a Bryce Young in a 12-team or like in the 12-team start 10 league, like the one we did previously, that trade would look much, much better in my opinion, because Bryce Young doesn't have the shiny veneer of a Shadur Sanders or a Cam Ward, but Bryce Young does, is basically the same thing, right? Young quarterback. He's really started to elevate his game in the past couple weeks, which is helping me out as someone that has back here the signed Bryce Young football. I need that to work out. I knew the second I got it, he'd probably be a bust, but we're making a comeback. But yeah, this would be a type of deal. If it's not the 101, but a later pick, I would absolutely love that. Next is one where it's like, if I just want to maximize value, taking the 102 and picking up a JSN and a second, I think is a pretty solid deal. I do think in this format too, a 10-team start 8 is very shallow. JSN is probably going to be better than even a Ted McMillan. I feel like that's a solid return in a shallow league where I snatch a top-end wide receiver and then also get kind of a later round running back or something like that in a class that's pretty deep at running back. Last trade. 103 and 204 for Nico Collins. I mean, what? This is the advantage of having it be a flexible pick right now. And I'm saying if you are sitting here and you're looking at all the players out there, and this is a 10-team start 8, so very shallow league, there's no way this 103 is going to be better than Nico Collins, someone that, like, frankly should be in borderline in that top range of wide receiver. I mean, he has been incredible, tied to an elite quarterback. I mean, obviously, Stroud had a bit of a setback this year, but we've seen many sophomore slumps before. I'm not too concerned. Nico Collins for the 103. These picks have a ton of value. And I think out of any draft in the past couple of years, just sitting on your hands with the 102, the 103, the 104, when the advantage of this draft is not the high-end talent, but the depth of it. There's a lot of running backs. There's a lot of tight ends. There's even some decent wide receivers. But just holding the top-end picks and just sitting on your hands is not going to really work in this year. I think this year we can take advantage of people wanting to move up in the draft, wanting to make the fun pick, and smash some of these deals like a Nico Collins, like a JSN. Or if you're looking for needs and you're like, I need this pick to be a quarterback, go out and see about Sam Darnold, especially with the playoffs bringing in higher level competition. We might see Darnold kind of struggle a little bit like he did against the Lions. These are the things I would be looking to do. Is if I need a quarterback, I'm not going to take a Sanders or a Cam Ward with one of those high picks. It does not make sense to me. Value-wise, I feel like someone in the league would rather take that bet. And if I can pick up a Nico Collins or a JSN or even just move back so I can still bite at some of these young high upside running backs in this class and pick up like a middling quarterback, I'm going to do that almost any time. Well, that wraps it up. Again, thank you for sitting through this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found something interesting. If you agree with what I say, or if you have some disagreements, definitely post down in the comments below. I'll make sure to respond to them and we can kind of talk out some trades. Also, if you haven't checked it out yet, dynasty-daddy.com, best website in the world. That's what I told myself. Yeah, it's kind of the backbone of this channel and what I do in fantasy. So definitely check that out, completely free. And I do also have a Patreon that's tied with features to the site, as well as you get early access to videos like this. And you can also recommend certain videos that you'd like to see. So definitely check that out if you're interested. I'll post a link below. And anyway, I will see y'all at the next video.